Hey everyone! If you've ever hopped on the guest Wi-Fi at a coffee shop or, worked in pretty much any modern office, you've actually used a really clever piece of tech you've probably never even heard of. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on VLANs and see how they bring some much-needed order to our super chaotic connected world.
So, I want you to picture this. Imagine your entire computer network. Every single device is just in one giant open room. Now, when one device wants to talk to another, it has to shout, and every other device in that room has to stop and listen, even if the message has absolutely nothing to do with them. It sounds chaotic, right? And incredibly inefficient? Well, that right there is the exact problem VLANs were invented to solve.
To really wrap our heads around why VLANs are so important, we have to jump in the time machine and go back to the early days of networking. Things were, well, let's just say they were a lot simpler and a whole lot louder.
So this single large room idea, network engineers call it a flat network, or a single broadcast domain. And in this setup, literally every single message is broadcast. It's shouted to every single connected device. That means the printer is getting confidential data meant for the finance department, your laptop is getting video streams from the security cameras. It's just a constant, unnecessary flood of digital noise.
And this, well, it led to this absolute nightmare scenario called a broadcast storm. This is where the whole network would just grind to a halt, totally overwhelmed by all this irrelevant traffic. Every device's processor was just burning cycles listening to and then throwing away messages that weren't for it. And security? Forget about it. It was like a huge party with no rooms and no doors. Just loud, messy, and completely insecure.
Okay, so you've got this mess, right? Networks are getting bigger, performance is just tanking, and engineers needed a smart, elegant solution. They had to figure out a way to build walls inside that single noisy room, but without, having to buy a whole new building. And that's where the virtual LAN comes in.
So back in the early 90s, this brilliant engineer, W. David Sanskoski, had this totally revolutionary idea. He thought, what if we could group devices together logically, no matter where they were physically plugged in? The goal was simple but genius. Cut down on all that digital shouting and add a layer of security by creating separate virtual networks using the exact same physical hardware. And that, right there, is the magic of a VLAN. It's a technology that lets you take one single physical switch and basically slice it up into multiple, totally isolated virtual networks. Think of it as putting up digital, soundproof walls inside that one noisy room. Now, the accounting department can be in their own little room, and the engineering team can be in theirs, even if their computers are all plugged into the very same box.
All right, so how does this magic trick actually work? You might be thinking it's some super complex process, but the secret is actually surprisingly simple. It all comes down to adding a special digital label to the data.
The secret sauce, the whole shebang, it all comes down to this little digital sticker called a VLAN tag. And it's brilliant in its simplicity. Just think of it like putting a colored sticker on a piece of mail. If a letter has a blue sticker, it only goes to people in the blue group. If it's got a red sticker, it only goes to the red group. It's just a really simple but super effective way to sort and direct traffic.
And this is where it gets really clever. The industry standard for this is called 802.1q. So first, a frame, which is really just a little packet of your data, shows up at the switch. Then, and this is the cool part, the switch injects that 4-byte tag, our little colored sticker, right into the frame's header. This tag holds the VLAN ID number. And from that moment on, the switch knows to forward that frame only to other ports that belong to the exact same VLAN. It's an incredibly powerful system.
So just how many of these virtual rooms can you build? Well, the tag uses a 12-bit field for the ID, which gives us a theoretical maximum of 4,096 possible VLANs. Now you take out a couple that are reserved for special purposes, and you're left with 4,094 unique virtual networks you can create. That is more than enough digital walls for pretty much any situation you could ever dream of.
All right, enough with the theory. Let's talk about where you actually see these things out in the wild, because believe me, they are the invisible backbone of modern offices, data centers, and even a lot of smart homes today.
Now, there are a few ways to assign devices to a VLAN. By far the most common is port-based, where a network admin just says, okay, this physical port on the switch belongs to VLAN 10. But you can get more advanced too, like MAC-based, where a device is assigned to a VLAN based on its unique hardware address. You can even create special VLANs just for one type of traffic, like a voice VLAN, to make sure your internet phone calls are always crystal clear.
Okay, so where does this actually show up in your day-to-day life? Everywhere, it turns out. That guest Wi-Fi at the coffee shop, that's a VLAN, and it's what keeps other customers off the shop's payment system. In an office, it puts up a wall between the finance department's sensitive data and the rest of the company. And in a smart home, this is a huge security tool. You can put all your insecure IoT devices, your smart toaster, your cameras, all that stuff on their own VLAN. That way, if one of them gets hacked, the attacker is trapped in that little room and can't get to your personal computers.
But, like any powerful tool, VLANs are not a magic bullet. There are some definite pros and cons we need to talk about, so let's weigh them out.
Let's start with the good stuff, the wins, and they are big. First, performance goes way up because you're killing all that broadcast noise. Second, you get a huge security boost by containing threats. An attacker on the guest VLAN is stuck there. Third, it's incredibly flexible. You can group users together by their job, not where their desk is. And finally, it's super cost-effective because you're creating all these divisions virtually without having to buy more expensive hardware.
But on the flip side, there are some warnings, some things you got to be careful about. It definitely adds a layer of complexity to managing a network. And, by design, devices on different VLANs can't talk to each other. If you need them to, you need a router or a more advanced switch to act as a go-between. And finally, the security isn't just automatic. One little misconfiguration can open up a security hole, and skilled attackers can even use techniques like VLAN hopping to try and jump between your virtual networks.
And that last point about security, it's a really big deal. So let's dig into that for a second, because it's so important to understand what VLANs can and, more importantly, cannot do for you. There's a saying in the security world that just hits the nail on the head here. Segmentation is not isolation. A VLAN creates the different rooms, sure, but you still need something else to actually lock the doors between them.
And this slide right here, it breaks it down perfectly. A VLAN gives you segmentation. It separates the traffic into different groups. But for real security, you still need tools like firewalls and access control lists, which are basically just rulebooks for your network, to act as the security guards for any traffic that needs to move between your VLANs. So think of VLANs as a critical first layer, not the entire security system.
And just in case you were curious, yeah, your own computer can totally play in this world. All the major operating systems, Windows, macOS, Linux, you name it, they all support VLANs. Now, usually this stuff is managed at the switch, not on your personal laptop, but the capability is built right into the core of how modern networking works.
So there you have it. From a really smart solution to that old noisy room problem, VLANs have grown to become an absolute cornerstone of modern networking. They give us the power to bring logical order to physical chaos, dividing our digital world into safer, faster, and much more manageable pieces. The only question left is, how could organizing your network change your digital life?